Hey guys, welcome back to Urban Odyssey. Today we have a great show planned for you. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. Today we have Michelle Gibson with us, and before I introduce her, I would like to just go ahead and show everybody the work that she has done. She's been uploading videos to YouTube for probably about 7 or so years now. This is her channel. She's got almost 400 videos, stuff on just historical timelines, technology, being hidden, all kinds of things. Very interestingly, stuff on the ley lines and the Earth energy systems. And so I highly encourage people to check her out and follow her work. It has been very interesting to me. And so, without further ado, I would like to welcome Michelle Gibson. Hello.
Hi, Irvin. It's great to be on your show. So thank you very much for for the introduction and for taking time to watch my work and reaching out to me about this interview.
I'm really glad to have you here. I have watched your work for a great part of the last month. Just a lot of the stuff that you've got has kept me entertained, has kept me just blown away at some of the information that you have covered. Really comprehensive timelines and what was going on in certain areas and what that may mean. So, if you would like, why don't you go ahead and just give people a basic introduction to you, who you are, your background, and whatnot.
I can do that, Irvin. Thank you so much. So if you had told me 20 years ago I'd be doing anything like this, I would have told you you were crazy because this is not something that I even imagined myself doing. My background is actually in geriatric social work, which is what my college degree was in. And I did that for about 13 years and got out of it in the early 2000s. But I've always had an interest in hidden history. And I was born in 63. And up until the internet came along, it was really scarce to have any kind of information available to find about things that have been hidden from us, hidden history, suppressed history. And I did enjoy history in school, and I'm glad I didn't major in history in college because one of my messages is everything we've ever been taught is a lie and needs to be questioned. Um, and there's reasons for that, and it's very complex because why would they lie to us? But Urban and I were talking a little bit beforehand. It's like their end goal is control and power over all of us, over the resources of the earth, over the creator. And so this has been put into place to give us an explanation for things because they really can't do what they've done. We're sovereign beings. And so they needed us to agree to what they were doing. And they've accomplished this with this false history. And they've also accomplished it with mind control kinds of things and lying to us and gaslighting with the news about what's really going on. Um, it's pretty deep. And most of us, myself included, had no idea and wouldn't even have questioned it. Um, Probably even, I'm 62 now. So, probably my questioning has really started within the last 20 years. So even though I never bought the program wholeheartedly, um, my whole life I was always questioning some of the things. But the whole idea that everything that we've ever been taught is a lie, it just never even occurred to me. And then I received information just from the course of living my life, especially since the early 2000s, that led me into this path of discovery through my own original insights and intuitions. that has brought me into the place of blogging and then making videos from my blog posts. Because once I received this information, I realized I needed to get it out any possible way. So even though my comfort level is writing, I knew I needed to become comfortable with speaking. So I've gotten better over the years with practice,
Very
but
much.
I'm still still not my favorite thing. But this information is important to get out, and if nothing else, for you to consider. And I organize information in such a way that I kind of want to show you what I see and give you the opportunity to make your own decisions about whether my conclusions are on point or not.
Hmm. That's the
But
best way to do it.
yeah, it's not my style to tell you what to believe,
Hmm.
but I do want to show you what's available to find. And there's just a lot of discrepancies in the narrative, and it really starts to fall apart once you start looking at it. And thankfully, with the internet, we can do our own research and connect with each other and share. And again, if nothing else, give you something to think about and give you things to research on. Do your own research. Don't
That
just accept what people tell you. Do your own research, because we have to be discerning. Right now, there's so much information and misinformation, and the controllers don't want this kind of thing to come out. They've kept it well hidden for a reason,
mhm.
and their only hope was to keep people from waking up to it. That's
Yeah,
how they maintain control.
what you said about giving people information, laying it out, and letting people have access to it, and then to make up their own mind on it. That's my philosophy also, and that's probably one of the reasons that I really like your work that you do, because well, first of all, your video production is very relaxing. You can put it on and just relax and watch it, and it's very easy to digest. And at the same time, you don't load it down with a lot of opinions or things that really come out of nowhere. Very much clear that you do lay things out on the line and raise great questions on it. But past that, you're really great about letting people make their own conclusions, and I think that's extremely valuable.
It's it's very, very much a part of my style and who I am. Um, in my personal life, I'm pretty much not confrontational, and I don't want to rock boats, and I don't talk about this kind of thing with people that aren't ready for it, and that's pretty much just about all of my family. I have two cousins that I can talk about a little bit with them about what I do, but most of my family's not there and not open to it, and so I'm very careful to share with people that are ready. And what I find is, on the internet, people that are ready tend to find me, and I think that's probably true of all this alternative research. Um,
Absolutely.
because to be told that everything you've ever believed in your life is a lie, or likely a lie, is not easy for most people to swallow.
That's true. It is. Generally, just to catch everybody kind of up to speed. The Your working theory is that between the years 1492 and 1942, there was a centuries long effort to kind of destroy as much of what came before that and overwrite that with a new narrative or timeline. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct. So basically, I've identified a timeline between 1492 and 1942. That's a 450-year period. The midpoint year is 1717, and there's 225 years on either side. And the 450 years is divisible into 950-year periods. And when I did research on the timeline from 1492 to 1942, I found significant initiatory events happening every 50 years, starting with Columbus in 1492, and there were other things going on. 1717 was when the Premier Grand Lodge of England was founded, and that was the same year they adopted the Anno Lucis, where they added 4,000 years to whatever year we're in. And then 1942 is midway through World War II. It's like the halfway point. And I also have a belief that the Philadelphia experiment is part of what happened to bring in this new system. But I think the true history of the world is nothing like what we've been told. The builders of civilization, I believe, go back to ancient Mu, and it was the same civilization from Lemuria to Atlantis to relatively recently. And that an event was caused that caused the destruction of this worldwide grid system, and that at that point the controllers created a rip in the fabric of space-time. And I have specific reasons for this, so it's documented. But it was not long after what's called the Great Frost of Ireland in 1740 to 1741 that Mayor Rothschild came in 1744, the founder of the Rothschild banking industry dynasty. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, came in 1748, and Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld came in 1750, and he was progenitor of the royal houses of Europe, and how that came about. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were first cousins through that lineage, and that obscure ducal line basically replaced the entire royal houses of Europe, and the original families were.
I've heard of that before, and that's what I was thinking of when you were just saying that. I've heard it recently. There was he just died or something, and there was someone who was supposedly had this reputation of being the real royal claimant of England, but I don't really know much about that. I wonder, there probably is a usurping of the royal lineage.
Right. Not just in England, but in Europe and other countries as well. From the original royal houses, which is a whole different story. And I'm going to talk a little bit about King James, the 6th of Scotland and 1st of England, because I know you've done a lot of work on the is it Jacobian or Jacobian?
Well, probably Jacobian. I would believe so my belief is just there's the Jacobites and the Jacobins. I'm kind of operating under the assumption that they're probably the same people.
It refers to King James and the House of Stuart, which I believe goes back to King Solomon. And the Jacob comes from the father of the 12 sons of Israel, became Israel, Jacob in the Bible. But to kind of go back, because it gets a little bit convoluted. So I believe this original ancient civilization that built all of the original infrastructure on Earth, that was part of this grid system, this ley line system, that got destroyed, and that the New World Order folks came in to build their new world on top of the ruins of the old world. And we're living out that New World Order agenda that's been planned and organized by these families, Illuminati families.
For so people can see.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that photo, because that's James, right?
It says Jacobus, so people can see right around the rim in Latin.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the whitewash of history, because I got another photo to show you of the same person as a Moor and as an Israelite, because I think they were one and the same. It's all been fragmented out and, put together, consolidated into this new narrative. Because they're basing the New World history on shards and pieces of the Old World, and they get their legitimacy to a certain extent from the royal House of Stuart that King James was part of. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. But so there was a whole advanced civilization, think Atlantis advanced, that existed up until relatively recently, that it got destroyed. And that, and this is my working hypothesis, and that at some point in our narrative, history is backfill. And I have a fairly recent video on my channel that goes into that, the backfill of history. And at some point, the controllers wrote themselves into the historical narrative. And that's when we learn about them in history class. And I think that point was sometime in the 1700s. I think it was sometime in that 1717, at the midpoint year of the timeline that I've identified, possibly around 1740. Other people are saying 1776, but we're all landing in that the 1700s. That was the actual beginning of this reset. And I think what we learn prior to that date in the 1700s, I think was fabricated and backfilled and put strategically into our narrative. And that's what we learn about. But we live amongst this incredible architecture, the old world architecture that's all over the earth, including the United States, when we're given the story about cowboys and Indians and, how there wasn't anything here and the colonizer just came in and built everything and they took credit for everything. No, they didn't build it.
It's really interesting.
Didn't build it.
And the architects that they have listed, one of them that you mentioned, I can't remember their name, but you look into their background and they don't have much of a background in architecture.
This is a story of numerous famous architects. Henry Hobson Richardson, who's credited with the Richardsonian Romanesque architectural style. Just beautiful, ornate stuff. Well, he went to school to study to be an architect, but he wasn't able to finish it because of the Civil War. And then he goes on to create these masterpieces. And the same story is told about a lot of different architects. And, it gets into a little bit of difficult areas because I think both like Frank Lloyd Wright and Frederick Law Olmsted, one being an architect and the other being a landscape architect, were major players in this reset. Especially Frederick Law Olmsted, the landscape architect, but Frank Lloyd Wright's supposed creations were Old World also. And a lot of these architects were called draftsmen. And I think that's exactly what they were. They were just drawing these buildings that were already there, making them look like a blueprint, and then they're given the credit for it. But and that's for every single thing, every single building, every single bridge on Earth. But then you get into my research going down the lines of railroads, streetcars, subways, roundhouses, trolley parks. Those were all part of the original civilization too.
I just want to let everybody know and restate this. The reason that I showed everybody your channel is also because it is hard to understate just how much information you've kind of put together, cataloged, and displayed for people. And so people really are encouraged, whoever's watching this, to check out your channel, because when you start to look into the videos you've done and you have put a lot of work into it, you start to see these details which will be needed to kind of follow along all of the way with what we're talking about, because this is just so overwhelming when you hold it up and let people see it and just give narration behind what's going on, and it leaves you with nothing but questions.
And I do start out by blogging. So all of my videos start out as a blog post, and my my website is Piercing the Veil of Illusion.
Okay.
I'm going to write that in here. piercingtheveilofillusion.com. So if you prefer reading, there's that way too. And I do have links to everything on in my video descriptions.
See if I can put it up.
Just make sure I got that right. piercingtheveilofillusion.com. Hopefully I got that spelled right. Okay, so that's another place you can go to look up the same information that's in the videos. But what got me started down this road was learning, besides my interest in hidden history from as far back as I can remember, when there wasn't as much available, but I looked at what I could find, was learning about sacred geometry and ley lines and the Moors. And then with those three pieces of information, I started my own original research. And, bottom line, I started looking at places on ley lines from place to place to place. And a lot of this hidden history came out from that. Seeing the same infrastructure all over the earth, even things that we would consider natural are part of this. So like rivers, and they have an S shape. And if you look into physics, there's a function for that shape with things like water flow, so that there would be a functional reason for it. Waterfalls, I believe, are part of the system. Again, we can't even comprehend how that could even be possible. But I consistently find like waterfalls and railroads correlate to each other. Just to give you an example, canals correlate with railroads and waterfalls. There's just a tremendous amount of information just looking at the physical infrastructure of an area and the history that goes along with it, and then applying this whole idea that Earth was like a circuit board. Everything was laid out perfectly geometrically for a reason, and every building had a function. And there's a lot of people doing work on Tartaria in general and looking at this fantastic infrastructure that existed even around the turn of the century, and World's Fairs. And the story that goes along with that is they were built to be temporary, and then they tore them down afterwards. And we're talking about pictures of buildings that just look really solid and made to last forever.
They did a good job if it was just fake,
Yeah, and it's again, the stories just don't add up, and that's the whole thing. What they tell us in the narrative doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And when you start pulling out the pieces, you can look at it and say, that makes no sense. But they got away with it because they controlled the narrative up until the internet.
Into the narrative, I wanted to ask, because of the focus being King James of Scotland and England, you mentioned what was the year of the Paradise Lost?
Paradise Lost was published in 1667 by John Milton.
Okay.
And there is a lot going on in the historical narrative in that decade between 1660 and 1670. So like 1666, Great Fire, Great Plague, Cestui Act. Other things happened around 1666. Isaac Newton threw up the apple in the air and said, gravity, and came up with this whole gravity thing. And that was in 1666, which is a really red flag for me. And then a lot of people talk about flat Earth, which I've come to see a lot of evidence that the shape of the Earth has been tampered with. And so I'm pretty much there. I didn't start out with an opinion, but I can see how everything has been altered into this whole heliocentric universe from a geocentric universe. And I think it was geocentric. But it got replaced by Copernicus in 1543. The thing about Paradise Lost, it's a long poem about fallen angels that were angry at God and said, got together in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer or Satan or Moloch, got together and said, okay, how can we mess up God's most favored creation? Well, that's exactly what's happened. So I look at Paradise Lost as like a early disclosure,
And
them telling us what they did.
so then they wrote that song that they just sang at the king's coronation, that Jerusalem choir song. And then they're talking about Jerusalem as England, and where does that come from? And all of a sudden you start talking about this and the whole King James and Jacobus and Jacobins pop up. And so I wonder, you know, has this been a big fake out? Is Jerusalem really in Scotland? Is that why they need that? They have to have this stone, and if they don't have the stone,
Mhm.
they can't put the crown on him. He's got to have this stone from Scotland. Stone of Scone, I think, is what it's called.
Yeah, Stone of Scone. So let me share my screen. And I pulled up a lot of different things that kind of focus on this time of history. Um, let me see. Okay, I've got two here that I think, or maybe three. It is a lot of information, so just bear with me.
No
So,
problem.
let me pull up this one first. How's that coming through?
Looks fine.
Okay, let me look here real quick. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is from a blog post called Planting the New World.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I found when I was looking on in our historical narrative. Let me just read the beginning of this. I had originally planned to compile the extensive amount of research that I've done in the past on Boston and the surrounding area in Massachusetts for this post, because it is a great case study in what's taken place during the reset of our history. It quickly turned into something much larger because Boston and the surrounding area played a huge role in the English colonization and plantation of the New World, first with the establishment of the Plymouth colony in 1620 and then the Massachusetts Bay colony in 1630. There is so much more to this story, and a deep dive into the background of what was going on in our historical narrative reveals the means by which the New World, the world we have been living in and have come to know as real, was planted on top of the Old World, and how this was accomplished and when. So in our historical narrative, there's some background on the colonization of North America that coincides with the accession of King James VI of Scotland and King James I of England and Ireland, which took place on March 24th of 1603, which we're told was the day that Queen Elizabeth I of England died childless. The union of the crowns was dynastic, meaning that the laws and interests of the two countries remained separate and distinct at this time. The reign of King James VI of Scotland and I of England was a period known to history as the Jacobean era, a time also used to describe the architecture, arts, and literature of the same time period. I've come to believe, after my research, that the historical person we know of as King James of Scotland and England was a fictional character, under whose name the New World Order agenda of plantation and colonization was rolled out. But I do believe that the fictional King James of the House of Stuart was in fact based on a real person of an ancient royal Scottish lineage of kings tracing back to King Solomon. The Stone of Scone, also known as the Stone of Destiny and Jacob's Pillow Stone, is an ancient symbol of Scottish sovereignty used for centuries in the coronation of Scottish monarchs and since 1707 in the coronation of British monarchs. When not being used for the coronation ceremonies of British monarchs at Westminster Abbey in London, it is kept on display in the Crown Room at Edinburgh Castle alongside the crown jewels. Jacob was the son of Isaac and grandson of Abraham, and later received the name Israel. The tribes of Israel came into existence through his sons, and King Solomon was descended through the lineage of Jacob's fourth son, Judah. So you've got the biblical story of Jacob's dream, and the idea that this was the stone he laid his head on, something along those lines.
Never knew that.
So these portraits of King James are both in existence. The portrait of King James on the left contains in it the inscription Jacobus, or Jacobus, which is the same photo that you were showing, except it's a different complexion.
That's interesting.
And the portrait on the right is a far more common portrayal of him. So in our narrative, we're told the word plantation first started appearing in the late 1500s to describe the process of colonization. The plantation of Ulster began privately in 1606, shortly after the union of the crowns under James in 1603, and began officially in 1609 by the Scottish Parliament. So right after King James ascended the throne in our narrative, they started this plantation process. But they started out in Ulster and Ireland first. That was the first place that they went. And so that took place like around 1606, somewhere in there. Oh, yeah, 1606. So they were kind of practicing. They were practicing what they were going to do in North America, which comes next.
I'll have to check that book out. That looks like a good book right there.
So James comes to the throne in 1603. The plantation of Ulster starts in 1606. And then the English colonization of North America began at the same time. So in 1606, he issued royal charters for what became known as the Virginia Company and the Virginia Company of Plymouth, with the objective of raising funds from investors in order to colonize the eastern coast of America. So they're setting up these colonies and types of colonies and how they came into being. I mean, how they basically took everything over and setting up corporations. So a royal charter is a formal grant issued by a monarch under royal prerogative as a letters patent. So this is how it was done early on. King James was credited with authoring the True Law of Free Monarchies in the late 1500s, right before 1600, before he became king, where he stated there is a theological basis for monarchy, and in which he sets out the divine rights of kings as a political and religious doctrine of the legitimacy of a monarchy. So basically, in it, he proposed an absolutist monarchy by which a king may impose new laws by royal prerogative. So he became the lawmaker, right? And we still have that today. We have that today with executive orders. That's how they did it. One person saying, "Let it be so," and being invested with this authority. In this case, in this book by James, but you have it with the popes too.
I was going to say there was another something I was reading about the English Civil War, and the book goes into the idea that they literally did not understand, or they didn't have the ability to understand that the king was capable of being wrong, infallibility, but to state that again, like they literally couldn't, they didn't know that. So in the book it says if the king ordered someone, like another person, to just kill someone randomly, it would be the guy who he told to do it who would be held responsible, because the king was not capable of being wrong. So very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they set this up so that one person had the authority. Governors General of Australia and Canada, same idea. One person was put in charge of all the decision making, and there was a definite reason for that. These letters patent are a type of legal instrument that are a published written order issued by a monarch or other head of state, granting an office, right, monopoly, title, or status to a person or corporation. So they can be used for the creation of corporations or government offices, or granting city status or coat of arms. Since the 1300s in our historical narrative, royal charters have been used to grant a right or power to an individual or body corporate, which is the formal term for a corporation. A body corporate functions as a legal person in law that can do things a human person is usually able to do, but are not literal people. And then that gets into the whole thing that they do with our straw man and turning us into a company. So they turn companies into people and people into companies because they can't touch us because we're sovereign beings.
In 1666 as well, the Sestate QV. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah. After the Great Fire of London and the Plague of London, which took place around 1665, 1666, they passed the Sesta QV Act, which basically declared everyone lost at sea and putting everything in a trust for the government to administer until the living person comes back and claims it. But most people don't know about that.
Yeah. What an interesting, a lot of people bring up the topic of maritime law, and a really simple way that we've come to explain it is the basically we follow orders or people die. That's maritime law, and the captain is in charge. But the only person who can remove the captain is the ship's doctor. So the doctor is really the guy in charge. He can say the guy is the captain of the ship is unfit, and he can remove him and put the second in charge in command. And so we're all on a ship, and people follow orders or people will get hurt. That's generally a very simple way of looking at the maritime system.
Yeah, I mean, it's how they've managed to take over everything and keep us in line, essentially,
Fear.
by creating rules for us, but not for them.
Mm-hmm.
So talked about the plantation of Ulster in 1606, and then you had Jamestown come up around that same time. So Jamestown comes up about that same time in Virginia. And the Council for New England was said to have been established by a royal charter from King James as an English joint stock company in order to found colonial settlements between 1620 and 1635. And so they had the Virginia Company in the red outline and the Plymouth Company in the blue outline, and they established colonies at Jamestown and a place called Popham in Maine. Popham didn't last. It was maybe a year, a little bit more than a year, and there were too many problems, but Jamestown did. Okay. I do have a lot of details, so bear with me.
Feel free. Go ahead. I'm eagerly following along. I appreciate the presentation. That's very, very nice.
So they start this process of getting the land by colonization, particularly by elite families, through this process of plantation. This is all under James, is when it got started. It wasn't their land, but whatever the cataclysm that I'm talking about, where the grid was deliberately destroyed, the energy grid, there wasn't anybody there. So they just kind of came in and scooped everything up. Or the people that were still living from this original civilization were probably in hiding. They could have been underground. There were places to live underground. And these families, associated families, came in, and the new royalty, and we talked about the court of wards and liveries. Mm-hmm. You said you got a book on it. Mm-hmm. They replaced the original nobility with their own people, essentially.
Yeah.
So you have these new earls coming in, like William Alexander, who was buying up this land in New England.
Yeah, the
And
destruction of the monasteries gets rid of all the old heritage or any records that were, those were where a lot of medieval records were kept. And so during the Protestant Reformation, that was destroyed in England, and God knows what went with it.
right. Well, all of the genealogies and repositories of family lineages were in these monasteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own doubts as to whether or not King Henry VIII was actually a real person. But a lot of this reset stuff that we're talking about started in the reign of King Henry VIII,
Mm-hmm.
including the destruction of the monasteries, dissolution of the monasteries, and then the courts of wards and liveries, which all started around the same time period.
Mm-hmm.
So these islands, for example, the Elizabeth Islands, which are just off the coast of Cape Cod and very close to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, most of them are privately owned by the Forbes family, the same Forbes family that we know of today, a wealthy American family of Scottish descent
Mm-hmm.
that have long been prominent in Boston, that were movers and shakers from early on. And it's really interesting how many of these families had their fortune come from trading opium and also tea and other things, but opium.
Yeah.
I mean, opium is right up there with the things that they were trading. And again, this is how they got their wealth.
Yes.
One of the ways was cloth, and they built their new system on cloth. So they're bringing in these drugs to do that, to drug people.
Mm-hmm.
So people would be stoned out of their minds and not know what the heck was going on. And they did the same thing with alcohol.
Yeah, and people have to come back for more. That's the most crucial part to the business model.
So they don't hide this. This is on the Forbes House Museum about opium, the business of
Crazy.
addiction. 11 members of the Forbes extended family traded in China between 1785 and 1887, profiting from tea and other exports and from smuggling opium. They developed shipping expertise and devised strategies to evade Chinese officials. And we're talking about other families like the Adamses, the Cabots, the Coolidges, the Lodges, the Lowells, the Peabodys. They all got their wealth from this opium trade.
So they were drug addict or drug sellers.
Yeah, this has
Yeah.
been going on a long time. They still are.
Mm-hmm.
They still, you hear about the CIA and drug running and,
Oh yeah.
all these drugs coming in. I mean, there's a reason for it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been very effective for a long time.
Absolutely.
And then you start looking into like the origins of the Plymouth colony. And, we get this story about the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving and all this other stuff. But when you look into it, you find out that the truth is very different. We hear that they came in for godly reasons and wanted to purify the Church of England, after the King Henry VIII had separated and formed the Church of England, and they're not happy, and all these things are going on. But what's interesting when you look into what our narrative tells us, the Puritan congregation that settled Plymouth obtained a land patent from the Virginia Company of Plymouth in June of 1619. They sought to finance their venture through a group of businessmen known as the Merchant Adventurers, who viewed the new colony as a way of making a profit. Officially known as the Company of Merchant Adventurers in London, it had been founded in the city of London in the early 15th century, and its main import or export was cloth, especially undyed broadcloth, in exchange for a large range of foreign goods. That's what you find when you start looking into it. And then I'm finding that cloth was a silent player in the unfolding of what's taken place here. And an example, the use of arms went from individuals to corporate bodies starting in 1438 with the Royal Charter of Incorporation for the Worshipful Company of Drapers. And they were wholesalers of cloth used mainly for clothing. So you find drapers becoming players in all of this. And we talked about that a little bit. Let me stop sharing here for a moment if you want to share what you found.
Well, I'll bring up my article just so that we have a visual, because I did a article inspired kind of by some of these videos and histories that you've also done on the Jacobins, and I found some writings on it which were interesting. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. So this was the book that I actually had to piece it back together. I was only able to find like bits and pieces of it, but I was able to put it back together. And some of this I also kind of held it side by side to John Robinson's Proofs of a Conspiracy, which is a little bit better known. And what I was interested in also while you were presenting what you did, I started to think and we won't necessarily get into this, but the whole idea of the I going to the J, where did the J come from? And that's a very big point of contention because, in Latin, there was no J. I was J in Latin. So where I kind of resume from this is from James the First, everything that you've laid down, the onset and initiation of all of the plantations and colonial efforts, all the way forward in 1688. James II, who was, I believe, the son of Charles I, who was beheaded. James II was restored to the throne, and then he is exiled, and William of Orange comes over during the Glorious Revolution and takes over as King William and his wife Queen Anne. But from Mackey's Masonic Encyclopedia, the College of Claremont, a college of Jesuits in Paris, where James II, after his flight from England in 1688, resided until his removal to St. Germain's. During his residency there, he is said to have sought the establishment of a system of Freemasonry, the object of which should be the restoration of the House of Stuart to the throne of England. Relics of this attempted system are still to be found in many of the high degrees, and the chapter of Claremont, subsequently organized in Paris, it appears to have some reference to it. So I start to look more into that, and you find a period of history, the Jacobite succession, in brief, James II and the seventh. So the same from the College of Claremont. The Jacobite succession is this kind of playing out. There were a few battles, occurring in 1689, 1715, 1719, and 1745. And then at the end of the 1700s, you have the French Revolution and whatnot. So that's that period of time that we're interested in. On down, some of the arms. One of the Stuarts was a Duke of York, Cardinal Duke of York, and also a claimant to the throne. And so I'll read this section on Jacobins. This is also from Mackey's Encyclopedia, and the link is there for anyone who'd like to view that. The Jacobins, a political sect that sprang up in the beginning of the French Revolution. I think it's very hard. I would be very hard to convince me that the Jacobins and the Jacobites existed at the same time period, but aren't the same people. So I'm going to operate off the assumption that these are the same people or very closely related to the same people. So a political sect that sprang up in the beginning of the French Revolution, and which have origin to the Jacobin clubs, so well known as having been the places where the leaders of the revolution concocted their plans for the abolition of the monarchy and the aristocracy. Lieber says that it is a most surprising phenomena that so large a body of men could be found uniting rare energy with execrable vice, political madness, and outrageous cruelty, committed always in the name of virtue. And that's pretty much what's happening to this day. Beruel in his History des Jacobinisme and Robinson in his Proofs of a Conspiracy both endeavor to prove that there was a coalition of the revolutionary conspirators with the Illuminati and the Freemasons, which formed the Jacobin clubs, those bodies being, as they contend, only Masonic lodges in disguise. Falsity of these charges will be evident to anyone who reads the history of French Freemasonry during the Revolution, and more especially during that part of the period known as the Reign of Terror, when the Jacobin clubs were in most vigor. The Grand Orient in 1788 declared that a politico-Masonic work entitled Les Jesuits chasses de Maconry et leur poignard brisé par les Macrons, meaning the Jesuits driven from Freemasonry and their weapon broken by the Freemasons, was the production of a perverse mind prepared as a poison for the destruction of Freemasonry, and ordered it to be burned. During the Revolution, the Grand Orient suspended its labors, and the lodges in France were dissolved in 1793. The Duke of Orleans, the head of the Jacobins, who was also unfortunately Grand Master of the French Freemasons, resigned the latter position, assigning as a reason that he did not believe there should be any mystery nor any secret society in a republic. It is evident that the Freemasons as an order held themselves aloof from the political contests of that period. You find out that the 32-degree motto is a motto that's also used by the Jesuits from the Catholic Church. Very much all related. And I'm not going to go through all this, but step one of their strategy was to dismantle the defenses of the church. Step two, capture the public mind through propaganda. Step three, infiltrate the halls of power. And while they're doing these things, to use rewriting of history, encyclopedias, they call them reading societies, controlling books and literature, which was made for the public, and infiltrating halls of power through education and government offices. But this is kind of inspired by some of the stuff that you've presented, and I really think that there's no coincidence that this pops up, at the same time as all of that other stuff that you've just covered. And all of this seems so familiar. A lot of it's still happening to this day. But I encourage people to check out that article if they want to read more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely put Freemasons and Jesuits at the top of the list of the resetters of history, and other secret societies were working with them.
Absolutely.
So they were the main perpetrators of creating this new world system and all the explanations for it and all the books and so forth, and how they manipulated our timeline and used this system against us, the grid system and the sacred geometry, and then they turned it into black magic and occulting of the grid itself and also our timeline. So our timeline is heavily occulted. Everything in our world is heavily occulted because they want to control us by all of these means. Surreptitious.
I mean, for instance, Adam, just the example that I just presented, but that's by far not the only example. They just admit to this, and so the way I look at it, and I'm sure you probably feel the same, to read stuff like that and a lot of it, and then to just assume that everything we're told is based in truth. It's like they admit to it. So why would you assume that that's not the case, that they've done this?
Yeah. And that's where our work really crosses over, because I can show you what I found in my research, and I'll go into that more here in just a moment. And I can tell you, yeah, it was the Jesuits and the Freemasons and other fraternal orders. But I don't have that in writing that you just shared from your research to back up that what they put in writing is what we see happening.
Mm-hmm.
Many manifestations of our world today, and there's many others operating at this subconscious level
Mm-hmm.
for control, mind control, and convincing people to give their sovereignty away by tricking them
Mm-hmm.
into
Absolutely.
believing that they're the ultimate power and authority, and
Yeah.
making it, in their system illegal to question them or whatever, however our judicial system is based, it's the same ideas. There's something really wrong that's been going on. But I'm going to go back because there's a lot
Sure.
of information I've compiled, and some of it's put together in one place, and then there's pieces of this that
Please.
that you've
Yeah,
mentioned that it's
I'm
like I
enjoying
got to
it.
figure out where this is. Um, but let's go back to planting the New World first, because that's where I left off. And the Pilgrims, the Drapers, being the first corporation, and before that it was people.
Mm-hmm.
And then how the Pilgrims were actually funded by the merchant adventurers who were trying to establish these economic opportunities here in North America, and that the merchant adventurers recruited people known as the strangers to help the pilgrim colonists, um, merchants, skilled labor, indentured servants, and several young orphans. And you get into the orphan story, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. But this is the kind of thing that you find in our history. They credit these historical figures like Miles Standish, the military leader of the Mayflower, with building these elaborate forts,
Mm.
and we call them star forts these days, that have been explained as military fortifications, but appear to have had a different function altogether, which I believe was serving as a battery in the Earth's grid system. And these same forts are found all over the Earth.
They do call them batteries. Some of them are called batteries, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Some of
Mm.
them are actually called batteries. These star forts that are supposedly military fortifications, that also have ridiculous stories told about them. Um, and so getting into what the narrative says, which I always take with a grain of salt,
Mm.
what they tell us happened. Um, but they're getting into some different areas here, and I think this one talks about the Court of Words and Libraries. Just a second. Yeah, this is all in here. Okay, I don't have to go looking somewhere else for that. Okay, so they started the whole plantation process in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was the expanded version of the Plymouth Colony. Okay, so it's interesting that I started to research the historical figures that are found in the National Statuary Hall at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., because I was finding some really strange characters in there in my research.
Good
And
idea.
what are they doing there? So I kind of hit the mother lode when I started researching the National Statuary Hall, where they have 2 representatives per state. So I got about halfway through that, and I haven't gotten back into it, but I need to, because there's a lot of hidden history in there. It was through learning about John Winthrop, who is representing the state of Massachusetts, that I learned a lot of the stuff that I've talked about that you picked up on. So he was a Puritan leader, who was born in 1587 or 1588 in England to a landowning family. His family was granted Groton Manor after the dissolution of the monasteries that took place in English history between 1536 and 1541 during the reign of King Henry VIII. And there had been a previous lord of the Groton Manor, who was an abbot, and John's families took over, and after it was transferred to them, and then Winthrop's father transferred the family's holdings in Groton to him, and he became lord of the manor at Groton. So he was the landholder of a rural estate, enjoying manorial rights. So you're getting into some feudal concepts here, which is really interesting because you had lord of the manors in early U.S. history, and they probably still are.
Mm-hmm.
His son was a lord of the manor in, I believe, in Connecticut. Winthrop's son.
Interesting.
So I talk about the dissolution of the monasteries, where approximately 850 monasteries, convents, and friaries in England were
That's a lot.
expanded and dissolved, and there weren't any left.
Yeah, that's a
Their
lot.
their income and was taken and assets disposed of, and in many cases, like Glastonbury Abbey, the buildings on the property were left in ruins. That's the actual history we're told, that the dissolution of the monasteries actually left the abbey in this shape. Now, at this point, I question even that, but that's the story that goes behind it, that they
Mm-hmm.
took it apart, like physically. And so the new Winthrop coat of arms was confirmed to his uncle by the College of Arms in 1592. And you see the helmet at the top. And the earlier heraldry didn't have that. They didn't have a helmet hiding the face or the head.
I've heard that might be related to Venice, Venetians.
I think it's related to the Moors, but the Moors were worldwide and
Mm.
including Venice. So I can see a tie-in with that. But what they did was they established. I'll get back to the law of arms here and the right to bear arms in just a moment. The College of Arms was said to have been first incorporated as a royal corporation in March of 1484 under King Richard III, and then reincorporated in 1555 under Queen Mary I. Heralds are appointed by the British monarch, and they are delegated to act on behalf of the crown on matters relating to heraldry. During King Henry VIII's reign, it was said that the College of Arms at no time since its establishment was the college in higher estimation, nor in fuller employment than in his reign. In 1530, King Henry VIII conferred the duty of heraldic visitation on the college, that tours of inspection between 1530 and 1688 around England, Wales, and Ireland to register and regulate the coats of arms of nobility, gentry, and boroughs, and to record pedigrees. So I think this is when they replaced the original royal families. It was during this time, and this is how they did it.
Yeah, that's very, I think that's hard to disagree with because at the very least, so much was lost, destroyed, gotten rid of. Almost at that point, it would happen if they wanted it to, or even if they didn't want to. So I think there's absolutely an overwriting of history around this time, undoubtedly.
So you had mentioned something about the right to bear arms, and it's really kind of an interesting situation because of the language.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it again. There we go. The law of heraldic arms governed the bearing of arms, which is the possession, use, or display of arms, also called coats of arms, and armorial bearings. According to the law of heraldic arms, coats of arms and other similar emblems may only be borne by one, ancestral right or descent from an ancestry through the male line, or two, a grant made to the user under due authority like the state or crown. With regard to the law of arms, as part of the general law, such armorial bearings are considered a form of property and confer certain rights upon the grantee. So then you get into the definition of the right to bear arms as according to the usual description of the law of arms, coats of arms, and armorial badges, flags and standards, and other similar emblems of honor may only be borne by virtue of ancestral right or of a grant made to the user under the authority. Ancestral right means descent in the male, like I said, how it's conferred. But the language is really interesting on the right to bear arms, and what are we really actually talking about with the intent of like the framers of the Constitution and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's an interesting language distinction on another way it can be looked at, and why are weapons and heraldry described with the same language?
Yeah.
Just a
And
lot of questions.
at the same time of the destruction of all the old genealogy and whatnot, then they establish the central authority for just giving people that right. I can't remember what it was called. Um, the people who decided the peerage in England.
Yeah, it is it does bring up a lot of questions.
Hmm.
And let me just see if there's anything else I want to talk about here, and then I've got a few other things that we can look at real quick.
Sure.
Um, so around the same time the College of Arms was housed on Queen Victoria Street in London in 1555, in our historical narrative, the Stationers' Company Register was established as a record book for the Stationers' Company of London, a trade guild given a royal charter in 1557 to regulate the professions of the publishing industry and an early form of copyright law. So around the 1550s,
Mm,
this Stationers'
interesting.
Company was given the right to seize illicit editions and bar the publications of unlicensed books. It is
Right
considered a
around the same
crucial
time.
resource for the English literature of the 16th and 17th centuries, containing factual data and hard data that is found nowhere else. So as I put here, all of this speaks of the documentation of the new everything and the empowerment of the seizure and suppression of everything else. And that includes recording the works of Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and how those works hide a lot of history too.
What was the uh, there was a book that I think you didn't you just mention it. You said it had a lot of very hidden history in it. I think I might have gotten that somewhere. I think I downloaded it when you mentioned it in one of your videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's the interesting thing is in this classical literature of this time period, the 1600s, 1700s especially, but really on at the 1800s, 1900s. It's in fiction. It's in plays. It's in there's Ben Jonson wrote plays called Masques, Masques,
Mm,
where it really seems like they were telling us this hidden history, but disguising it as a play for the court. Um, so around the same time as the dissolution of the monasteries, between 1536 and 1541, the Court of Wards and Liveries was established. Starting in 1540, during the reign of King Henry VIII, by 2 acts of Parliament, and was established around the issues of practical matters relating to the Crown's right of wardship and livery of young orphaned heirs, where their father had been a tenant in chief of the Crown, including the Crown having rights over the deceased estate, including income and land.
yeah, I got the history and records of the Court of Wards. That one right there. I think
Yeah.
that's it.
So I find that information about the Court of Wards and Liveries very intriguing, with the Crown taking over the estates and rights of orphaned heirs.
Hmm.
And I'd love to know more about what's going on there. Where the orphaned heirs come from,
Hmm.
number one, and then here's the state taking over, literally passing laws to be able
Prob
to do this and take over their estates.
Probably my this is just my hypothesis. Putting all this together, get rid of all the old genealogy, get rid of their parents who are the nobles, take control of the children, and then get the children to install you kind of over time by raising them and grooming them into power. That was very popular back in the day. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and I think it was a very different world before then, but this is what has come down to us, and I think
yeah.
how we got here. So, was there a connection between the English words livery and delivery?
Mhm.
And so again, you have the Court of Wards and Liveries. It's in there. What's livery? Look it up. Livery is like a uniform or symbol or insignia that designates ownership or affiliation. So often it would indicate the wearer of livery was a servant, dependent, or friend of the owner of the livery. So again, the clothing establishing
Going to look at
somebody was owned.
I'm going to look it up in an old legal dictionary and see what that if that says anything interesting under the word livery.
It's more to the point with the word delivery,
Mm-hmm.
which is transferring something from one place or person to another. So the court of words and liveries was doing that, the process of giving birth, and in law, the formal or symbolic handing over of property to a grantee or third party. So that again, that was more descriptive of what this court was actually said to be doing in practice than the word livery denotes. But obviously they're both connected.
Here's what it says in the 1828 Webster's. It says livery. It's a noun, a norm from liverare, to deliver. It says to the act of delivering possession of lands or tenements, a term of English law. It is usual to say livery of seisin, which is a feudal investiture made by the delivery of a turf of a rod or twig from the feofor to the feofi. In America, no such ceremony is necessary to a conveyance of real estate, the delivery of a deed being sufficient. Two, to release from wardship, deliverance. Um, Three, the writ of which possession is obtained. Four, the state of being kept at at a certain rate as to keep horses at livery. Five, a form of dress by which noblemen and gentlemen distinguish their servants. The Romish Church has also liveries for confessors, virgins, apostles, martyrs, penitents, etc. Hence, six, a particular dress or garb appropriate or peculiar to a particular time or things, as the livery of May, the livery of autumn. Now came still evening on, and twilight gray had in her sober livery all things clad, was from John Milton. See the whole body of liverymen in London to clothe in livery. In London, a freeman of the city of some distinction. The liverymen are chosen from among the freemen of each company, and from their number are elected the common council, sheriff, and other superior offices of the city of London. They alone have the right of voting for members of parliament.
Yeah, there's something really important in all of that in terms of
The
how they've
city of
accomplished
London
this.
is really interesting. The city of London has got such a strange history. It really is so obvious that when you look at it, the history is so old that they kind of have embedded themselves so deeply there. I'm not necessarily sure. Probably they probably wanted to remove or get rid of them plenty of times, but I just don't think they can, because they have apparently been in the city of London since Roman times. They say. Um,
Well, let me go about that because I've done a long, in-depth research piece on the company,
sure.
and a lot of the things I'm talking about here with the Virginia Company and the Virginia Company of Plymouth and how all this came about, how they acquired the land and how they made money and all that stuff ties back directly into that, and I think it ties into your work on the Templars, which I don't believe started out as this negative force in our world. I think the original Knights Templar were the builders of
Mm-hmm.
this place, were Masons, and I think armor was like a free energy device worn by them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they were for war. I think they were to enhance human ability. And the Knights Templar got taken over like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let me go back here and just see if there's anything else I want to finish up on with the planning of the New World. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about that timeline around 1717, because there were some interesting things going on with regards to the line of Stuart and King James, the House of Hanover. I seriously think that, like, Henry VIII was perhaps a complete fabrication. Um, his whole story is like this whole thing with let me hang on just a sec. His wives. That's what we learn about King Henry VIII, his wives, and divorcing his first wife so he could marry Anne Boleyn
Mm-hmm.
and create the Church of England. Um, so I just have some real questions about that. And I talked earlier about the original coats of arms are different than the ones with the helmets on top.
It's interesting.
And I think they put the helmet on top to disguise who we're really talking about.
Do you where do you know where did that image above, like the old coat of arms, where did that, do you know where that was from?
It's something I got off the internet.
Oh, okay.
Urban, you can probably find it.
Okay.
Just start looking for earlier heraldry of British nobility
I did find a
and like
section.
the Morphin family crest, Morfyn,
I found a
because that's
section
what
in the
this
old
is.
18, it was like the 1892 Encyclopedia Britannica had a very deep section on heraldry, which was much more detailed than like the modern Encyclopedia Britannica. Maybe it'll have something like that in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff has all been really well hidden.
Yeah.
And I talked a little bit about Fomenko's work here,
Yes, he's interesting.
and about the idea of phantom timelines,
Mm-hmm.
and how he put that together. Of the central concepts of new chronology asserted by Fomenko and his colleagues was that up to the 17th century, historians and translators often assigned different dates and locations to different accounts of the same historical events, creating multiple phantom copies of these events, and that this chronology was largely manufactured by Joseph Justus Scaliger.
Have you seen the graphics that Fomenko does, where he does them side by side and how they look like they're the same kind of thing going on? I can show it if you would like let me to show it real quick.
Yeah, go ahead and have that pulled up. I'm going to go back there in just a moment.
Okay,
Um, I want to finish out my thoughts on this
go ahead.
particular piece, and then there's another one I want to go show you some timeline things.
Okay.
So, the 1582 to 1589 time period in England, which was around the same time of Scaliger's New Chronology, two occultists were said to have been involved in scrying activities that ended up bringing fallen angels and other negative beings into the dimensional plane. I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. What we're dealing with on Earth
Yep.
are these beings that are here that shouldn't be here. But Dee and Kelly had a lot going on together with bringing these things in
I
during that
wonder.
time period.
I wonder if they got information or the stuff they salvaged or saved for themselves from the monasteries. They got all this information, and then they started to do all this, whatever was in those records, and they took whatever they wanted, and then they started to play with it, and that's what we're seeing here. I wonder.
And that's possible. Dee was said to have like an extensive collection of works about Atlantis and things
Mm,
like that. But whatever they were doing, they brought in this stuff, and even today, the Enochian language is central to the practice of Enochian magic, which involves the evocation and commanding of various spirits. And I think that's absolutely what's been going on
mm-hmm.
without our knowledge. And what's really interesting is that with sorcery being defined as the use of magic, in particular black magic, which is the use of power gained from the assistance or control of evil spirits. So I've already mentioned King James writing the book on the divine power of kings, divine rights of kings. Right around that same time, he was said to have published a book called Demonology in 1597, which was described as a philosophical discussion about necromancy, or the summoning of spirits.
The guy who wrote the
So,
Bible.
yeah, yeah,
People don't know that. That's an
yeah,
really interesting fact.
yeah. So check that out. I don't think I mentioned that here, but yeah, same King James guy, King James Bible. So John Dee constructed what were called sigillums or sigils from the practice of Enochian magic, and we still have things like that showing up in like the monster logo.
Mm-hmm.
Where that sigil is 6. So you've got 666. Unleash the beast. I can go into a lot more here, and I have. So again, understand that for those that aren't familiar with my work, that I have done serious research on all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
hope people check out some of your stuff because it's very interesting to me.
and I just want to mention to Forgive and Mercy. Um, I have ideas about Antarctica that I don't have a lot of detail on. Um, there's so much more to the story. I mean, the
Yeah.
controllers are so interested in that part of the world. And I do think there's things that are going on down there that are hidden from us. And what's really interesting was when the European colonizers went out to explore the world in the early 1800s, France and the United States were like days within each other of discovering Antarctica. So it's like France discovered it first in January. I want to say 1847. Don't quote me on the year. But I've got it documented, so I just would have to go back and find it. And then the United States exploring expedition discovered Antarctica like within days of the French. And then it was in the same year that the British discovered New Zealand in the
Mm-hmm.
same part of the world. So it just lots of stuff to unpack, but you have to let go of anything that you've ever learned and just see all the information that's available with new eyes.
Mm-hmm. So true.
And pattern recognition is a big part of this. But I want to talk about this timeline because
I'm just going to show you this real quick.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. It won't take long. But it's pertaining to Fomenko. So Fomenko is a Russian author who has done extensive work, and he's even done so it's like 12, maybe 15 volumes of the history. But then he's got a whole other book just on the math that he uses, and he does the astrology too. And what he does is he starts to create these uh, basically putting series of events side by side and how they line up. You see, they're almost mirror images of each other. What he's showing you here is how various different uh, parts of history, and I've got a few more here. I'll show you a couple other ones. There are quite a few of these. He's done very high quality work, and I think his theory of the same event being recorded by different, scribes or message carriers, and then the same event being kind of mistaken as two different events, and padding, fake time being kind of created by looking at one event and then it being mistaken for two events. Now, is this like all of it? Maybe, but is it part of it? Most definitely. I think this most definitely is um, something that has happened. Really, the only question for me is just like how much fake time has been created. But it's extensive. Of course, though, we don't here in America. Russia is bad, so we just don't think that anything they do is anyone there is not allowed to be smart because Russia is bad, is I guess how people look at it. But turns out when you actually read some of their writings, they're very interesting, and you start to wonder or have the answer to why they don't want you reading stuff from Russian scholars.
Yeah, yeah, and it was actually I think from Russian researchers that the whole real look into Taria came out. And
And,
my belief is that this was a worldwide Moorish civilization, referring back to ancient times like ancient Lemuria. But that was all the same. I said earlier, I think that Lemuria, Atlantis, and existed up until relatively recently, and then it was destroyed. But Tartaria was actually the Russian, Asian, let's say Asian, because it was Russia, China, Japan, Korea, that part of the world was Tartaria. And then there were different empires. The Barbaria was an empire in Africa. The Persians and the Ottoman, and they were all different. The Mughals in India, they were all part of this civilization, but they were positive. They weren't fighting each other. But that's the story we've gotten, is they were all fighting each other. And Genghis Khan, and destroying Asia and then going to Europe.
Yeah.
I think the reality is Fomenko's work is, excellent detailed work on how it was done. But I do believe that this was more, the fabrication of history was a huge project, and there was way more of it fabricated than what we can imagine. And that I don't think they invented our history from scratch. I do think they based it on real people and real
I would think
characters
so
and
too.
real events. So they didn't just come up with it out of nowhere. They're not that smart.
Like it's co-opting. They always co-opt something. So, like you said, the Templars. Yeah, sure. They were definitely the biggest group of stone masons ever. But anytime a group like that gets big, it gets co-opted. They bring people, or even if they don't, just people with bad intentions. Usually, always end up going towards things like that. And we've pretty much both agreed that we're dealing with like a parasitic evil here.
Yeah, yeah. And the Knights Templars, and the other knights that are talked about in our historical narrative would have been powerful,
Mm-hmm.
just like the Masons. The original Masons that built everything it was very powerful technology.
Mm-hmm.
And we get into alchemy, and I think alchemy was inverted and used against us from what was originally a positive thing. And I've got research to back that up. But let me go ahead and show you this thing on the timeline that I want to show you.
Okay.
So I mentioned 1492, 1942, and 1717 as the midpoint year. And I first postulated this in writing in November of 2018. Was when I first blogged about it. And looking at it from this framework has proved very valuable in my research. Papal bulls was a big way. Same thing with the divine right of kings and the executive orders, where one person has this authority. So like in May of 1493, the Intra Terra papal bull was issued by Pope Alexander VI, and this bull became a major document in the development of subsequent legal doctrines regarding claims of empire in the New World. Because how they started acquiring the land was through this papal bull, and there was a lot of other stuff that came from it. And then in 1540, Pope Paul III issued a papal bull forming the Jesuit order under the leadership of Ignatius Loyola.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jesuits had a special vow of obedience to the Pope in matters of mission and direction and assignment. Another interesting thing is their symbol is the same as the black sun.
Yes.
And so is the Royal Order of Scotland's.
Is it?
The Royal Order of Scotland symbol is the same.
Let's see.
Same sun. And then they gave us the Gregorian calendar. They gave us a reason for that, but they took us off this original natural time in cycles that were present in the Mayan calendar, involving the synchronization and harmonization of human beings with natural cycles of time. So they moved us off of that into this linear time. And, it's easier to ritualize with a linear calendar, right? You have certain ritual dates that you do things like 322 and 9/11. 1031.
Yeah, numbers pop up a lot. Have you ever, like, whenever you looking at events and stuff, have you ever looked at like you add up the numbers of the date and see what number comes out? Because whenever you do, you'll find very weird stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about something similar that I found when I was looking at this timeline between 1492 and 1942, with 1717 being the center point between those 2 years. And what I found happening in 1714 was King George I of the German House of Hanover became King of Great Britain and Ireland, which marked the end of the rule of the House of Stuart, like we saw earlier. Then on January 4th of 1717, Great Britain, France, and the Dutch Republic signed the Triple Alliance in an attempt to maintain the Treaty of Utrecht, which was signed in April of 1713, in which, in order to become King of Spain, Philip had to renounce his concurrent claim to the French throne, which prevented the thrones of Spain and France from merging together, and ultimately paved the way for the maritime, commercial, and financial supremacy of Great Britain. So that was 1717. In February of 1717, right after that, James Francis Edward Stuart of the House of Stuart, called the Pretender, who at one time was a claimant to the throne, left where he was living in France after the Triple Alliance was signed in January to seek exile with Pope Clement XI in Rome. And I wrote here back in 2018 why he specifically went there, I don't know, but he died in Rome in 1766. And while most portraits online are of a white person, this is believed to be a portrait of James Francis Edward Stuart that was painted when he lived in France. And then you have, I've got a side-by-side between two paintings of the same person, and one's black and one's white, but there's a lot of similarities between the two in terms of what they're wearing and their hair and that sort of thing. On June 24th of 1717, the premier Grand Lodge of England, which was the first Freemason Grand Lodge, was founded in London. So I find very interesting. I was right in the middle of that time.
I was going to say what I just read a minute ago about the College of Claremont, the foundation of that order. The Jesuits helped King James II. I think that would have been his father, who you just mentioned, his father. And so that's probably why he went to see the Pope or stay with the Pope, is because he was already working with the church, which was interesting. That's an interesting angle, because Charles the First's wife was a Catholic, and maybe theirs was too. I can't remember.
Yeah. So he was forcibly prevented from claiming the throne, as far as I know.
Jacobins.
He wasn't able to. And then, interestingly, so June 24th was 1717 was the founding of the Premier Grand Lodge of England. On 1717, an interesting date from a numerological perspective, the premiere of Georg Friedrich Handel's Water Music took place for King George I on a barge on the Thames. So I put eyes are now on Handel, and there could also be a connection with maritime law here in a backwards kind of way. And then in 1717, Handel became a British citizen. And then I was guided by a psychic friend to look at Ireland in 1742. And when I looked for it on the internet, two things came up. One was that Dublin, Ireland was the location for the premiere of Georg Friedrich Handel's Messiah on April 13th of 1742. And the second is that there was an extraordinarily cold weather event in Ireland. And there's a book about it called Arctic Ireland. I didn't know about that prior to my friend saying this about Ireland.
That's interesting.
So there was an almost 2-year period of extremely cold, enduring weather there. The cause wasn't known, and it's in the historical record that it happened, but it's kept out of sight, where hundreds of thousands of people died in the cold snap, which was about a fifth of the population at the time. To this day, it's the longest period of extreme cold in modern history, and it led to food riots, famine, epidemics, and death. And then Handel's Messiah premieres in Dublin the following spring like nothing happened. And so I kind of look at it as this could have been happened from a rip in the fabric of space-time, which I speculated would have been the Philadelphia experiment. And you've got in 1717 the new British monarch coming from Germany, the Stuart heir in exiled Rome, and Handel showing up on the scene. And then, like I said earlier, Mayor Rothschild showed up in 1744 in Frankfurt, Germany. Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt was born in 1648, and he founded the Illuminati in 1776, and he was initiated into Freemasonry in 1777, and so forth.
Yeah, I wonder if that setup was, they set up this new rite of Freemasonry that is based on restoring the Stuarts to the English throne. He goes and does that his father does that in 1684, 88, I think. And then we have the pretender, his son, goes to live with the Pope. And then all of a sudden, the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry pops up. And then after that, you have the French Revolution. So I'm wondering if that was set up by them in 1717 as one of the main. And now that they've fought for quite some time and had they've tried to restore their influence through fighting. Now they're going to set up the Freemasonic Lodge to do it covertly. I wonder. The Frost of Ireland is very interesting too.
Yeah, you can find the book by David Dixon online. I'm not sure what the cost is. The last I heard, it was pretty pricey, but I'd have to dig it up. I think somewhere in my piles I have a copy of it. I did at one time. I definitely think Freemasonry is one of their vehicles, and Mayor Rothschild's son Nathan was a Freemason of this particular lodge, and others as well. And then you look at the history of bankers and revolutionaries during the 19th century, and they were Freemasons, brothers, brothers in secret society, and then the Bilderbergers and the Trilateral Commission, and all these,
so many of them,
Davos, all these secret meetings that they aren't so secret because everybody knows about them, but we're not allowed to come, and hush hush, where they're planning all this stuff. But I can go on and on and on and on. There's so many interconnections. But the information I just shared with you, I first uncovered in 2018, and I found a lot more since then around those areas. But you kind of have to let go of everything you've ever been told, and you have to look at things from a different lens. And when you look at it from a different lens and start putting things together, like they hate us, this has been about power and control and wealth generation, and it's not good. It's not a good situation for humanity. And maybe I can come on again and I can talk about the company, because I'm kind of running out of steam here a little bit, but
absolutely, yeah. We could do this again.
I would like to do that because it ties into what I was talking about with the Virginia Company and the Plymouth Company, and the Red Cross, which ties back into your work also.
Mm-hmm.
The CIA is called the company.
Yeah. And it was they're the people who founded it. They were all Knights of Malta.
So it's all interconnected on the hidden side of how this takeover occurred.
Yeah.
How they laid the foundations for it and set up the legal structure for it, and had at it.
The technique that they use by setting up, the Grand Lodge, for instance, and there are other, the Illuminati was another one. It's not just like the Illuminati was not the only one. This was a template that they had used, and it like you said, it exists within that gray space. And so the CIA, still to this day, is a way for the government to interface with that area of society, the underbelly, the criminal underworld. They can interface with the occulted, hidden areas of society, and they can do it with um, they have a what's that's on the tip of my tongue, like they can deny it. They're able to I don't know why it's not coming to me. They're able to say probable.
Plausible deniability.
Yes,
What you're thinking of.
absolutely. They're able to do that, and it is the plausible deniability which forms the basis of saying one thing and then doing the other. Plausible deniability and lying are two peas in a pod. So all kinds of those pop up, and what happens is they bring people in, and it becomes a brotherhood or a circle of friends. And a lot of people, like, they have this, they hype it up in their mind, but at the end of the day, these are pretty much circles of friends. These are people who hang out together, they party together, they drink together, they hang out together, and so they become friends. And what happens, as in, anyone who goes to college and joins a fraternity or sorority, you have a hazing rituals and ways that will bond the brotherhood together. And because you take your oath down on your knees with everybody gathered around and a noose hanging on your neck, and so that bonds you to these people, and you take an oath to keep each other's secrets. And so, if you have a best friend and he does something stupid and you cover for him, then you will have license to come back one day and say, hey, I covered for you, now I need you to cover for me. Then you're in it together, and it's a tangled web we weave. And so
That's how they kept it secret.
Yeah,
It's deep,
it is.
and it's occulted, and just like this knowledge of how to manipulate the human psyche in very negative ways. And then you get into MK Ultra and how that trauma based mind control um, really messes people up and creates multiple personalities and
Fear
alters, and
fear.
all the things that they can suggest, plant a suggestion in somebody's mind, and they go up and kill somebody, a whole
Yeah.
group of kids.
Yeah, it needs fear, like to feed the furnace. Instead of coal, the whole thing runs on fear. They breathe fear everywhere. Then they can use that fear to motivate people, but it is not a good motivation. A fear-based motivation is the parasitic dynamic, because when people are scared of something, they will do irrational things. That's what they want. That's how they maintain control, is through a constant sense of fear.
Right. And heretofore, it's been pretty effective. We've all grown up in this environment of this fear-based consciousness, and so now that we're waking up and coming back together again, I think that's probably one of the most challenging things, is navigating through this time right now that we're living in. We're seeing all this stuff unfolding every day. All the things we talked about are still happening. But there's also good things happening as well. You just kind of have to weed through the willows or whatever the saying is, where it's like you have to be discerning. Don't believe anything you're told. Do your own research. Even what we're saying, everything that I've talked about for the most part, except for the Philadelphia experiment piece and a few other things, you can look it up and find it. That's how I found it.
Mm-hmm.
I have had some intuitive guidance that's led me in some other directions that are different, but it's brought forward new information. So like with the dates around 1717, and then the 717 1717 with Handel's water music, and then King George VII of England announced the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which was the name of the House of Windsor, until 717 1917. So they changed the name to Windsor from a German name
17 is important.
Yeah.
It's
Yes. So there's something numerologically going on that I landed on when I found this timeline between 1492 and 1942.
the 17 is very important. It is a Freemasonic number for the reason of 1717, but 17th letter is Q. You know, the fascination with Q.
Mm-hmm.
It is the 17th letter. So all the um, ideas. Also, there's a more sinister meaning behind 17. There's a lot of different verses within different texts, different, not just the Bible, but other texts, where gematria revolving around 17 can be used for verses having to do with sacrifices of children. All of them are, the verse numbers will add up to 17. And so I don't know if they chose it for that reason or if that's just like one of those weird things that happens in addition to it. But 17 is a number that they use for some reason.
Right. You know, and it could be that there's some reverse occulting going on too. And I'm just throwing that out there.
Possible.
You know, in an occulted world, what's the best way to fight that? You know, is it by kind of using the same kinds of things on and reversing it for good? And I'm just saying that because there's a lot more questions because I think very few people are aware of the occult and the occulted nature of our world and how much it's here with us and we don't even know it.
Yeah, it's
I
the
mean,
energy around us.
I just kind of stumbled into it by the research that I started with sacred geometry and ley lines and Moors, and it just led me down all kinds of rabbit holes.
Yeah,
But I was awake to certain things before I even got started because I think once you start waking up and finding alternative streams of information, it's there. Um, I woke up to unity consciousness in this worldwide civilization. I want to say around 2012. Actually, I woke up to unity consciousness in 2012, and then between 2012 and 2016, I learned how dark the dark was. But it was also between 2012 and 2016 that I learned about this civilization to put it into better perspective in my life. And then 2018 was when I started blogging and making videos. And it seems like everything that happened to me to get me to be able to do this just happened synchronistically, in terms of being in the right place at the right time and the people that I met. And as hard as it is, because to me things seem to be unfolding slowly. I mean, I know how bad the bad is, so I want them to be held accountable. But I also see people coming together, you know, and things happening in my own life that wouldn't have happened at any other time. Everything happened at exactly the right time.
yeah. I
So
mean,
so there's things, you know, beyond our control or understanding happening all the time. So there's this really bad master plan of these controllers playing out that harm us, but then there's also all this other stuff happening that brings us together
mhm.
and works for good. So I just wanted to point that out there
Yeah,
because
no,
it's
that's great. I was gonna say, it's all the whole thing of asking it will be given, seeking you shall find, knocking the answer will be given unto you. So you just got to ask for information, and you have to understand the idea of truth setting you free, to put it really simply, because the truth sets you free, and then I mean that in a mental way. You know, once you learn the significance of just focusing on what is true and learning how to pursue truth through the means of gathering information from a variety of sources, uh, processing the information, and then teaching it to others. Actually, I think I've got the graphic here, and I'll show you because it's really profound. That right there, it's called the Trivium method. So you take in data. That's the grammar. You need the words. You know, if you don't know a word, do you look it up? That's a grammar. You gather the words. You gather the information from as many sources as possible. From that point, you process it. So that's the why. You take that data and you process it, and that's a bit of an individual step. But finally, and basically what you and I are doing right now is the rhetoric, the output, that teaching it to other people. And this whole process here will basically, if you repeat it and repeat it, it will bring you towards the truth over time. It is a pretty solid way of um, pursuing truth. And I think teaching it is very important. And to a degree, that's kind of what I set out to do. And it sounds like you and I hold the same view on that. Here's the information. Let other, the people who want it draw their own conclusions from it. And I was going to say, I would like you to send me that link to that article that you showed us, and if there's any other articles you want, and I will include all those links that you would like me to include, so people can
Okay.
check that out. I'm
Yeah.
sure that they would love it.
Yeah, I'll send you the blog post that I had pulled up to talk, and I talked from two of them. But
Okay.
I'll send you all of them so you can have that because it all cross references what we were talking about. One of them is the company which I want to come back on and talk about.
I would love to have you
It
back on. I really would.
ties more into it, but yeah, I was in learning and receiving mode for quite a while, and then 2018 was when I went into teaching mode, when I realized what I had received and realized I needed to get it back out. And one comment in closing about the Trivium method is, in a classical education, there was the quadrivium and the trivium, and the trivium was removed in around the 1850s, and that's where you get your critical thinking skills.
Yep. Absolutely. It is
So it used to
very
be part
important.
of education, and even if you've looked into anything about the Tibetan Buddhism and the training of the monks, um, this ancient knowledge about how to access our cities, our higher abilities. Part of their education is actually debating. When I was in school, all I remember is debate club, and I was never interested in that. It wasn't part of the curriculum. So again, there's a lot of things we're just not taught.
I Part of the reason, bringing guests on the show, as we kind of briefly talked about, just bringing people on so that I can learn from you, and then just share that with whoever else wants to learn with me and you. But then to bring people on and have a dialogue. So what the whole idea of going back and forth, kind of like you're passing a ball back and forth, it's a rhythm. And once you start going back and forth and having good dialogue with people who are receptive to it, then I learn new things. And, everyone learns new things whenever you have good conversation, I feel like.
Yep, totally agree. If we go in, it seems like there's so much in our world that trains us to go in to be oppositional and confrontational. That's what we've learned. But there's so much more to be gained from going in with the spirit of cooperation and learning from each other. And that seems to go without saying, except there's just so much of that oppositional, aggressive kind of thinking in our conditioning, unfortunately.
So true. And with that, I think that about wraps it up. And unless there was anything you wanted to throw in there, I think that's a pretty good spot to put a pin in it and wrap it up.
I agree, and I just want to say I'm really excited that you're interested in my timeline research, because that's a big part of what I've been doing, even though I've done so much more.
Yeah, I
But
love it. I'd love to have you back on.
yeah, the timeline research, I think, is where I put a lot of things together, just from looking at things differently and finding the patterns that are there to find in our official narrative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Michelle, thank you for joining me today. We will definitely do it again if you are are down to do it, then more than welcome to. I would be honored to have you back. I'm sure people will hopefully have, if they have any questions or ideas, things that maybe they would like to hear us talk about next. I will be more than happy to save those, write those down, and bring those up next time we do an interview together. But I think it would be great to do. And if you've got more information you would like to share, then that's great. More than welcome to. But,
it's wonderful.
right.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come on.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you responding and being eager to do it. It's great to meet people who have a lot of interesting information and who know what they're talking about and read the sources and read the history. A lot of people today don't want to do that. Well,
thank you again, Urban. I appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you, guys. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in to the interview. Please follow Michelle. Her link is in the description of the video. It's already there. And I will put the links of the articles that she sends over to me. If you haven't, please like and subscribe, whatever platform you're on, and subscribe to Michelle. And with that, guys, we will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.
See ya.